Okay, it's the 12th, and today we are going to divide complex numbers. But before we do that, we have to define something important. Conjugate. We have to be able to, how do we find a conjugate? Because in order to divide, we have to know what the conjugate is and then multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. So, what is a conjugate? Well, the numbers 2 plus 3i. The conjugate of this has to have the same exact real number, but the opposite imaginary number. So 2 minus 3i would be the conjugate. What if I had, what if I started with 7 minus 5i? Well, then the conjugate has to have exactly the same real number and the opposite imaginary number. So it doesn't matter what number is in front. Or how big it is or anything. You have to have exactly the same real number, but the opposite imaginary number. Right? What if it was like this? What if it was just negative, I don't know, 18? Right? What's the conjugate of that? Well, remember, this is really 0 minus 18. So the conjugate of that would be 0 plus 18i. Right? Now then, when you multiply by 0, that doesn't do anything, so you really don't need the 0 there. So when you add 0 to 18, there's nothing there. So that's the conjugate of that, that's the conjugate of that, right? The imaginary numbers have to be opposite each other. That's what a conjugate is. So how do we use the conjugate? Well, this is what we have to do. We have to, well, let's look at the problem. So say we had something like, I don't know, 7 divided by 2 plus 3i. Well, if I want to divide 7, the whole number 7, by 2 plus 3i, I have to, what did I tell you? Multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. There we go. Multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. So, in this case, I would have to multiply by, remember what the conjugate is? Exactly the same real number, but the opposite. Now I have to multiply the top and the bottom by the same number. That's just the way it works. So I'm multiplying the top of the fraction and I'm multiplying the bottom of the fraction. So on the top, all I'm doing is just distributing. We did that yesterday. 7 times 2, 14. 7 times negative 3, negative 21. Right? Okay, that's the top. What's on the bottom? 2 times 2, that's 4. 2 times negative 3, you have to do FOIL on the bottom, right? FOIL on the bottom, distribute on the top. Distribute. Right? So, what did I say? And then minus 6i, and then plus 6i, and then minus 9i squared. Okay? Now remember these guys right here, when you multiply by conjugates, they cancel out. Woo! And this is a real number. This is a real number right here. So what is that real number? Remember, if I is the square root of negative 1, then I squared has to be the square root of negative 1 squared. Well, when you square a square root, that's just negative 1. Okay? So I squared is negative 1. You have to remember that. So this is really negative 1. This guy right here. Negative 1 times negative 9. Hey, that's positive 9. Plus 4. 13. So 13's the denominator. And then 14 minus 21 is the numerator. Hooray! Okay, we divided 1. So it doesn't look like we divided. Yeah, well, that's what we did. Whenever you divide complex numbers, you have to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator, and you are done. So, let's do another one. What if we had something on the top that was imaginary? 2i, and then we were dividing by 5 minus 3i. Okay? Well, I have to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. So on the top I have the exact same real number, but the opposite imaginary number, right? So whatever the denominator is, you have to multiply the top and the bottom of the fraction by the conjugate of that denominator. Okay? Once again, you have to distribute on top, distribute, and you have to do FOIL on the bottom, right? So let's distribute on top. This times this, that would be 10i. This times this would be 6i squared. What is that? Somebody tell me. I squared is negative 1. That's negative 6. That makes this. Let's rearrange this because this is not in the right order, right? So this is negative 1 times 6. So that's negative 6 plus 10i. So that's the top of the fraction. What's on the bottom of the fraction? 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 3 is 15i. Negative 3, that's negative 15i. And negative times negative is negative 9i squared. Once again, these are opposites. Conjugates will always, the i's will cancel out. I squared really is negative 1. Negative times negative is positive 9. So on the bottom we have positive 9 plus 25. Hey, what is that? 34? I think so. 34. So what's the answer to the question? Let's just see. It's negative 6 plus 10i divided by 34. Is that the answer? No way, Jose. What? It has to be the answer. Well, we did everything right. We just have to reduce. Anytime you have a fraction, reduce. You have to reduce your fractions, always and forever. So look, all three numbers are even. That means I can divide everything by 2. So if I divide this one by 2, I'll have negative 3. If I divide this one by 2, I'll have positive 5i. And if I divide this one by 2, I get 17. This is actually the answer to the question. Right? So the question wanted us to get rid of, divide 2i by 5 minus 3i. Well, this is what came out. Right? So, our job, whenever we work this out, is to always multiply by the conjugate of the denominator, and then we'll have a fraction. And if it happens to be something that you can divide, like here they're all even, then you have to reduce. Reduce, reduce. If you leave it like this, you'll get zapped. Hey, let's do it one more time. Uno más. Once more with feeling. How about that, huh? This time we'll have a complex number on top. say we have 3 minus 2 on top. We can have 7 plus 4i on the bottom. Now then, I want to take this and divide it by. Can I do that? Sure I can. What do I do? Multiply the conjugate of the denominator every single time. So what's the conjugate? It's exactly a real number opposite the imaginary. So exactly the real number opposite the imaginary. Yeah. Exactly the real number opposite the imaginary. Whatever you do, do the same exact thing on top. Now we have to do FOIL on the top, and we have to do FOIL on the bottom, right? So let's do it. 3 times 7. 3 times -4. -12. -2 times 7. -14i. And then -2i. -4i. Negative times negative. +8i squared. So that's on top. Oh boy. And then what's on the bottom? 7 times 7, 49. And then -28i. +28i. Remember, that's supposed to happen. The middle terms cancel. And then positive times negative would be -16i squared. So these guys go away. Now, the top go away, right? They have to be put together. Remember, I squared is really -1. So this is really -1 times 8. That's -8. So what's up front? 21 minus 8. 21 minus 8. Isn't that 13? Yes. Good. How about 12 and -13? -28. Alrighty, look what we have up. On the bottom, we have -16 times I squared. But remember, I squared is -1, so negative times this one's really +16. So +16 plus 49 is, what is it? 65 maybe? 65. Yes. All right. So I have 65 on the bottom and 13. Now none of these are divisible by the same number. I can't reduce, so I am done. Hoorah. And now you should be able to do today's homework. There should be no problem at all, right? As long as you remember to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. Bye-bye.